The Lieutenant Governor of Ontario states on his website that we, as men and women, are pledging allegiance. Now they use that word, allegiance, to the Queen, who is an actual human being. That we are pledging allegiance to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada. When you look into the legal definition of the word allegiance, we find the following. This means a citizen's obligation of fidelity and obedience to the government or sovereign in return for the benefits of the protection of the state. So what they are declaring by saying that we are giving our allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen is that we are producing an obligation of obedience and fidelity to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of Canada. For here it states that an allegiance produces obligation of fidelity and obedience. This transports or transfers onto us. Therefore, if a man or woman takes this pledge of allegiance, they are accepting or they are creating this operation of law, this obedience to this sovereign. An oath is a solemn declaration accompanied by a swearing to God or to a revered person or thing that one statement is true or that one will be bound to a promise. The person making the oath implicitly invites punishment if the statement is untrue or the promise is not kept. They are saying that we, as men and women, are entering into this designation of citizenship of that artificial person, that juridical personality, by the oath of allegiance that we are expressing or that they claim we are taking. Now, an oath is a solemn declaration that is made, and it is accompanied by a swearing to a revered person. Now, in this case, in Canada, the revered person is Queen Elizabeth. That's who the Canadian oath must be taken to. Now, when one takes an oath, they are stating that that one who is doing the oath will be bound to a promise. And this implicitly invites punishment if that promise that you are binding yourself to is broken. So when we look into the Canadian Citizenship Act, we see that the promise that we are giving forth, or that they claim we are giving forth, is that we promise to obey the laws of Canada and to fulfill our duties as a Canadian citizen. Now that's the promise that they are trying to hold us to implicitly. And they are saying that we bound ourselves. They didn't do it, we bound ourselves by taking this oath, or by allowing this oath to be imparted upon us, by them claiming that we are standing under this designation. So we have made a promise, and that promise is, again, that we promise to obey the laws of Canada and to perform our duties as a Canadian citizen, and we are pledging our allegiance to the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. Remember, in the oath or affirmation of citizenship for a Canadian citizen, we state that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. This is the pledge, this is the operation of law, this is the legal duty that we fall under or become accountable to. Duty, this means a legal obligation that is owed or due to another, and that needs to be satisfied. An obligation for which somebody else has a corresponding right. When we look into legal dictionaries and legal understandings, and we check out the word duty, we see that a duty represents a legal obligation. And that legal obligation is owed or due to another. And that legal obligation must be satisfied, must be fulfilled. So they're saying that you have a duty or duties as a Canadian citizen. So you have legal obligations as a Canadian citizen that must be satisfied. Now, as a human being, they say that you take the oath of allegiance, and that this creates, or this causes an acceptance of those duties, those legal obligations that you have as a Canadian citizen. So prior to you ever taking that oath of allegiance, then you don't have any legal duty. You don't have any legal obligation to the sovereign, to Her Majesty. However, they will say that you are under subjection to this oath because they accredit you to having taken it. And if you're a new immigrant coming to the country, they actually force you to take it. It's part of your citizenship. When you do so, you are creating, you are accepting the legal obligation, and that legal obligation is not what you're being led to believe. That legal obligation is actually placing you into servitude to Her Majesty and to her laws. Because in the oath of citizenship, it says that you promise to obey the laws of Canada. When you go and check out the enactments, the regulations that have been passed and given force of law, you see that it is Her Majesty, with the advice and the consent of the Senate and the Parliament, that passes these laws into existence. These laws, they strip us of our human rights and freedoms. And these laws, they apply them upon the citizen. The citizen, the one who has promised and who has taken that oath, and that creates the legal obligation to obey those laws. However, all those laws are stripping us of our human rights and fundamental freedoms. A legal duty is a duty, which is a legal obligation, arising by contract or by operation of law. So you see that a legal duty can be created by operation of law. An obligation, the breach of which would be a legal wrong. You look and it talks about a legal duty. You find a designation in law, something titled a legal duty, and it states that it's a duty, a legal obligation, arising by operation of law, the breach of which, the duty, is a legal wrong. So a legal duty arises or comes forth or is brought into existence through an operation of law. So you can partake in an operation of law that creates a legal obligation upon you. So this is what we are witnessing through the oath of citizenship. We pledge allegiance, apparently, to Her Majesty, the Queen of Canada, Queen Elizabeth II, and this is an operation of law that we are using, this oath. And this oath, this operation of law, is now creating a legal duty upon us. And that legal duty is that we must follow the laws of Canada and fulfill our duties as a Canadian citizen. And if we breach those responsibilities, then it's considered a legal wrong. And the Crown, the ones who represent this de facto system, well, let's leave it at that. The Crown will try and charge you with a breach of those duties. So let's put this into real life operation. In the Constitution Act of 1867, Article 91, it states that it shall be lawful for the Queen, with the advice of the Senate and the advice of the Parliament, to make laws, and you check Article 1A, and it states that for the public debt and property. So the Queen, the government, this executive power, has the right to make laws that govern public debt and property. Now, all these laws that they create are applicable upon the ones who have pledged their allegiance, the Canadian citizen, and that one who has taken the oath. Now, this way that they operate the public debt and property rights is a legal obligation upon us. It's our duty. Whatever they say, whatever they enact, whatever rules or regulations they bring forth, they try to say that there is a legal duty, a legal obligation upon the citizen to follow these laws. And that you have pledged your allegiance, you have given your oath, and that you created this promise. You created this operation of law, and that if you fail to follow your promise by obeying these laws, then you can be implicitly punished. That's exactly the circle that's going on here in Canada. A subject is one who owes allegiance to a sovereign and is governed by that sovereign's laws. Speaking generally, we may say that the terms subject and citizens are synonymous. So there you have it. This is legal terminology, this is legal definitions, this is legal understanding. And this clearly comes out within the domestic law of Canada and within the domestic law of other countries when we look at what's going on. We, as citizens, are being rendered as subjects, or operating or are designated as subjects. The rights and freedoms that are afforded to us, we are operating them as a subject in servitude to the sovereign's laws, that being here in Canada, the Queen, the monarch. Submission, a yielding to the authority or will of another. This is exactly the situation that the Canadian citizen, that artificial person, has been placed in. It is forced, it is subjected to yield its will in submission to the desires, to the wants of the laws, the enactments, the regulations of Her Majesty. Through the Pledge of Allegiance, through that oath that is taken, the man or the woman is forced into submission through the designation of citizenship. And the will, the natural will of man, to be its own leader, to make its own decision, has now been stripped from him or her. Subordinate, to place in a lower rank, class, or position. Now remember, in the beginning, the Ontario Lieutenant Governor said that when we pledge, or when human beings pledge their allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II, that they are pledging their allegiance, their oath, to follow another human being. However, we have saw that through the laws and through this operation of law, they render us subjects and servants, and they enforce their will upon us through these enactments. We become subordinate to them. We are lower rank to them. We are considered the common class, while they are the ruling class. The Criminal Code of Canada, Article number 16. Notwithstanding subsection 59.4, no person, a human being, can be designated a person, or if you will, a person means a human being or an artificial person. So here, no person shall be deemed to have a seditious intention, by reason only that he intends, in good faith, to show that Her Majesty has been misled or mistaken in her measures, to point out errors or defects in the government or constitution of Canada, or a province, parliament or legislator of a province, or the administration of justice in Canada, to procure by lawful means, the alteration of any matter of government in Canada, or to point out, for the purpose of removal, matters that produce or tend to produce feelings of hostility and ill will between different classes of persons in Canada. This is an article of law, as I said, that is coming out of the Criminal Code of Canada. The Criminal Code of Canada also represents common law. Here we see that as human beings, we have every right to point out to Her Majesty that she has been misled or mistaken in her measures, meaning in the enactments, in her rules,